I'm Megan, a 28-year-old, and I truly never imagined my own parents would attempt to harm me and my beloved 10-year-old daughter Emma. All we desired was a typical family camping weekend. Instead, after a short hike to admire a beautiful waterfall, we returned to discover everything gone. The tents, the cars, our entire family. Only a chilling note remained. "This is for the best. Trust me." My heart sank, and a wave of pure dread washed over me as Emma squeezed my hand, her voice a tiny, confused whisper. "Mom, where did everyone go?" It was in that horrifying moment that the agonizing truth dawned on me. My own family had callously left us to perish in the wilderness. Before I reveal how we miraculously survived and ultimately sought justice, please share where you're watching from in the comments below, and subscribe to hear the full gripping story of betrayal and resilience, the deep roots of discontent, the tension with my family. The Mitchells had been festering for years, but I never in my wildest dreams thought it would escalate to such a monstrous act. My parents, Harold and Barbara Mitchell, were always incredibly controlling with rigid expectations for their children. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home in Pennsylvania, appearances were everything to them. My older brother Ryan always fit their mold perfectly. He was the quintessential straight-A student, a college athlete who married his high school sweetheart Tara. They had the ideal son Tyler, and Ryan even joined our father's accounting firm. Then there was me, the perpetual disappointment, the black sheep of the family. I married young at 21 to David, an artist whom my parents never approved of. "He's an artist, not a professional with a real job," my father would often sneer. When I became pregnant with Emma, shortly after, my parents acted superficially supportive, but their disapproval always simmered beneath the surface, evident in their tight smiles and backhanded compliments. "At least you'll have a beautiful baby," my mother had remarked during my pregnancy, her tone laced with a subtle jab. "Even if your life isn't turning out quite as planned." 3 years ago, when David and I divorced, I foolishly expected some support from my family. Instead, I was met with harsh judgment. "We told you he wasn't right for you," my father declared over dinner the week after David moved out. "Maybe now you'll finally start making better decisions." The divorce wasn't even my choice. David had fallen in love with someone else, a fellow artist he'd met at a gallery showing. The betrayal from David cut deep, but I worked tirelessly to create a stable, loving life for Emma and me. I earned my teaching degree, found a good job at an elementary school, and managed to provide a warm home for my daughter despite all the challenges. The seeds of treachery are sown 2 months ago. I received a job offer that promised to change everything, a position at a prestigious school in Seattle, with significantly better pay and incredible opportunities for advancement. When I told my parents about my decision to move across the country with Emma, the real trouble began. "You can't take our granddaughter away from us," my mother shrieked, her voice rising higher than her usually controlled tone. "What about Ryan and Tara? Tyler and Emma are so close." They weren't really. We only saw Ryan's family at mandatory holiday gatherings where Tyler mostly played video games, while Emma tried unsuccessfully to engage him. "You're being selfish as usual," my father added, his voice laced with disdain. "Running away won't solve your problems, Megan." I stood my ground, my voice firm. "This isn't about running away. This is about creating a better life for Emma and me." The arguments raged for weeks, with Ryan and Tara joining forces to try and convince me to stay. The pressure was relentless, but I held firm. Then, surprisingly, my father called with what seemed like an olive branch. "We should spend some time together before you leave," he said, his voice unusually gentle, almost too gentle. "What about a family camping trip to Blackwood Forest? The whole family, you, Emma, your mother and me, Ryan, Tara, and Tyler. One last hurrah before you go." I was instantly suspicious. Yet a tiny flicker of hope ignited within me. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally accepting my decision. "Emma would love that," I said cautiously. "Great," he replied. "Ryan is already planning everything. We'll handle all the details." Looking back, I should have noticed the glaring warning signs. The hushed phone calls between my father and brother that abruptly stopped when I entered the room. My mother's peculiar comment about learning valuable lessons when we discussed the camping trip. Ryan's suspiciously detailed questions about my wilderness experience, almost none, and swimming abilities moderate at best. But I was so desperately craving family harmony before our big move that I blindly ignored these glaring red flags. Emma, however, was ecstatic about the trip, especially the thought of spending time with her grandparents and cousin in the great outdoors. "Maybe Uncle Ryan will teach me to fish," she exclaimed as we packed our bags. "And Grandpa said there's a beautiful waterfall we can hike to." The treacherous trail. The drive to Blackwood Forest took nearly 3 hours, the last 45 minutes, on winding dirt roads with no cell service. When we finally arrived at the remote campsite, I was struck by just how isolated it was. Not a single other camper in sight, just dense forests enveloping a small clearing near a serene lake. "It's perfect," my father declared, a strange glint in his eye as we unloaded the cars. No distractions, just family. That first day felt deceptively normal, though the conversation felt strained. My mother kept harping on how much Emma would miss her family in Pennsylvania. Ryan barely spoke to me, focusing instead on setting up the 3 tents. One for my parents, one for his family, and one for Emma and me. That night around the crackling campfire, as Emma happily roasted marshmallows with Tyler, I caught my brother and father exchanging a look that sent a shiver through me despite the warm flames. But I pushed the unsettling feeling aside, telling myself I was being paranoid. If only I had trusted my instincts, I might have prevented the horrors that followed. The next morning dawned bright and clear. After a breakfast of pancakes cooked over the fire, Ryan suggested we all go fishing. I'd never been particularly interested in fishing, but I went along wanting to participate in the family activities. Emma was genuinely excited to learn, and surprisingly, Tyler actually engaged with her, patiently showing her how to bait the hook. We spent a couple of hours by the lake, the adults making stilted conversation, while the kids compared the size of their catches. Emma managed to catch a small bass, and her proud smile momentarily made me forget the underlying tension. Around noon, as we walked back to camp with our modest catch, my father put his arm around my shoulders. A rare gesture of affection that instantly put me on guard. "You know Megan," he said, his voice unusually smooth. "There's a beautiful waterfall about an hour's hike from here. You should take Emma to see it after lunch. It might be your only chance before you leave for Seattle." "That sounds nice," I replied cautiously. "Will everyone be coming?" "Oh, no," he said quickly, a hint of impatience in his voice. "Your mother's ankle is bothering her and Ryan, and I need to repair one of the tent poles that broke this morning. Tyler gets bored with hiking, but you and Emma would really enjoy it. There's a clear trail the whole way." I looked to Emma, who was already bouncing with excitement at the idea of a special expedition with just me. "Please, Mom, can we go?" Before I could answer, Ryan approached, pulling something from his pocket. "Here," he said, handing Emma a small compass. "Just in case you need it." I frowned. "Why would we need a compass if there's a clear trail?" Ryan shrugged, his expression nonchalant. "Always better to be prepared in the wilderness. It's not like you have much outdoor experience, Megan." I bristled at his condescending tone, but I accepted the compass for Emma's sake. She immediately began examining it, turning it in different directions, and watching the needle swing. After lunch, as Emma and I prepared for our hike, I noticed my mother packing away much of the food into coolers. "We don't want to attract bears," she explained when she caught me watching her hands trembling slightly as she secured the cooler lids. The trail to the waterfall was indeed clear and well-marked, though steeper than I'd expected. As we walked, Emma chattered happily about school, her friends, and her excitement about our move to Seattle. About halfway there, however, her tone changed. "Mom," she said hesitantly, her small voice filled with an uncharacteristic uncertainty. "I heard Grandpa and Uncle Ryan talking last night when I went to use the bathroom." I slowed my pace, my heart beginning to pound. "What did they say?" "Something about teaching you a lesson you wouldn't forget. Grandpa said it was the only way to make you understand." She looked up at me, her innocent blue eyes troubled. "What did he mean?" A chill ran down my spine despite the warm spring air, but I forced a reassuring smile. "Oh, you know how Grandpa talks, sweetie. He's probably still upset about us moving. Don't worry about it." Emma didn't look convinced, but she nodded and continued walking. I should have turned back right then, trusting my instincts and my daughter's innocent observation. But I desperately didn't want to believe my own family would do anything truly harmful. The waterfall was genuinely spectacular. A 60-foot cascade of crystal-clear water plunging into a rocky pool. We spent about half an hour there taking photos and dipping our toes in the frigid water. Emma collected some pretty stones, and for a little while, I forgot my growing concerns. The haunting realization. It was mid-afternoon when we started back, and I found myself hurrying our pace in inexplicable urgency, pushing me forward. When we finally emerged from the forest trail into the clearing where our campsite had been, I stopped so abruptly that Emma bumped into me. The clearing was empty. No tents, no cars, no coolers, no camping chairs, no fishing gear, no family members. "Mom," Emma's voice was small, barely a whisper. "Where is everyone?" I stood frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. My first thought was that we had somehow taken a wrong turn, emerged at the wrong clearing. But no, there was the fire pit we'd used that morning, now just cold ashes. There was the distinctive fallen log where we'd sat for breakfast. This was our campsite, and everyone was gone. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking and thin, issuing in the vastness of the trees. "Dad, Ryan." No answer, only the chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I approached the center of the clearing where our picnic table had been. In its place was a small folding table I hadn't seen before. On top of it sat a sealed plastic container and a single sheet of paper held down by a rock. With shaking hands, I picked up the note and read the message written in my father's distinctive familiar handwriting. "This is for the best. Trust me." I read it again, unable to comprehend the sheer audacity. Then I opened the plastic container. Inside was a small tent, a flashlight, a lighter, a basic first aid kit, and what looked like enough food for maybe 2 or 3 days. They had left us, deliberately, in the wilderness miles from civilization with no car and no cell service. "Mom!" Emma's voice cracked as she tugged at my sleeve, her eyes wide with confusion and the first glimmers of raw fear. "Mom, what's happening? Where did everyone go?" I turned to my daughter, her innocent face mirroring my own growing terror, and I had no answer that made any sense. My own family had abandoned us to the wilderness, and I had no idea if they ever planned to come back. The harsh reality of survival. The reality of our desperate situation hit me like a physical blow as I watched the sun begin its slow descent toward the tree line. We had maybe 3 hours of daylight left, and we were utterly alone in the vast wilderness with minimal supplies and absolutely no way to contact help. "Mom, are they coming back?" Emma asked, her voice small and uncertain. I knelt in front of her, forcing myself to appear calmer than I felt. "I'm not sure what's happening, sweetie, but we're going to be okay. First, let's see exactly what we have to work with." I emptied the plastic container onto the ground and inventoried our meager supplies: a small 2-person tent, a flashlight with extra batteries, a lighter, a basic first aid kit containing bandages and antiseptic wipes, a small pot, 2 bottles of water, a box of granola bars, some beef jerky, a bag of trail mix, and 2 apples. It wasn't nothing, but it wouldn't last long. Emma picked up the compass Ryan had given her earlier. "At least we have this," she said, trying to be brave. I nodded, touched by her attempt to find something positive. "That was smart of you to keep it safe. Now let's set up the tent before it gets dark." My hands trembled as I tried to assemble the unfamiliar tent. I'd never been an outdoorsy person. That was more David's territory. It took several frustrating attempts before we managed to erect the small shelter. It looked flimsy and utterly vulnerable against the vastness of the forest surrounding us. "Should we try to walk out?" Emma asked as I secured the tent's final stake. I considered it briefly. "No, honey, it's getting dark and we don't know which direction to go." The road was winding and we drove for a long time on dirt paths. We could end up getting more lost. I didn't add that we had no idea how far we were from any main road, or the daunting fact that Emma with her small legs would never make it that far on foot. As dusk settled around us, I got Emma settled in the tent and desperately searched through my backpack, hoping to find something useful I'd forgotten. At the bottom of the bag, tucked into a side pocket, I found a folded piece of paper that hadn't been there when we left for the waterfall. Under the beam of the flashlight, I unfolded it to find my mother's familiar elegant handwriting. "Megan, this intervention is necessary. You've always taken the easy way out running from your problems instead of facing them. Taking Emma away from her family is just another example of your selfishness. A few days in the wilderness will teach you the responsibility and consideration for others that you've always lacked. We'll return when we believe you've learned your lesson, Barbara." The paper crumpled in my fist as hot tears of anger and raw betrayal spilled down my cheeks. An intervention. They had abandoned a mother and child in the wilderness as some sort of twisted, sadistic lesson. Memories flooded back my father's sharp criticism when I changed my college major from business to education. My mother's disapproving frown when I chose to work through my marital problems with a therapist rather than keeping it in the family. Ryan's smug face when he told me I should have tried harder to save my marriage. This wasn't just a sudden act. This was the culmination of a lifetime of insidious control and manipulation, a final desperate attempt to force me to bend to their will by putting not just me, but my innocent daughter in mortal danger. "Mom," Emma's voice came from inside the tent, soft and concerned. "Are you crying?" I quickly wiped my tears and ducked into the tent. "Just a little frustrated, sweetie, but we're going to be fine." Emma was already in her sleeping bag, clutching her stuffed rabbit that she'd fortunately brought in her backpack for the hike. "I'm scared," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I heard wolves earlier." I slipped into my own sleeping bag beside her and pulled her close. "Those were probably just coyotes, honey, and they're afraid of people. The tent will keep us safe." I tried to sound braver than I felt. "Why did they leave us, Mom? Did we do something wrong?" My heart broke at the question. "Absolutely not, Emma. You did nothing wrong. This is grown-up stuff between me and Grandpa and Grandma. It has nothing to do with you." "Is it because we're moving to Seattle?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Partly, but that doesn't make this okay. What they did was wrong." "Will they come back for us?" "I don't know," I answered honestly, my voice thick with emotion. "But we're not going to just sit here and wait to find out. Tomorrow we'll figure out a plan. As Emma drifted into an uneasy sleep beside me, I remained wide awake listening to every ominous sound from the forest around us, the distant howl of what I prayed were just coyotes, the rustle of nocturnal creatures in the underbrush, the whisper of wind through the trees that sometimes sounded disturbingly like voices. My mind raced through terrifying scenarios. We could try to hike out, but in which direction we could stay put and ration our supplies. But for how long? Would my family really return, as my mother's note suggested? Or was that just another cruel manipulation? And if they did return, what then? Could I ever forgive this unforgivable betrayal? One thing became crystal clear as I lay in that flimsy tent with my daughter's fragile sleeping form beside me. Whatever relationship I'd had with my family was over. If we survived this, when we survived this, I would never ever allow them near Emma again. With that fierce resolution burning in my heart, I stayed awake all night meticulously planning our survival and silently promising Emma that I would get her out of this wilderness safely no matter what it took. The fight for life. Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong that seemed obscenely cheerful given our dire circumstances. Emma was still asleep, her face peaceful in the soft morning light filtering through the tent fabric. I slipped outside, stiff from the hard ground and utter lack of sleep. The morning air was crisp and cool as I surveyed our campsite in the harsh light of day. The reality of our abandonment was even more stark and chilling. I needed a plan, a systematic approach to our survival, until we could find a way out. When Emma awoke, I had already organized our supplies and painstakingly written out our priorities in the small notebook I'd fortunately brought on our hike. "Good morning, sweetie," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "Ready for an adventure?" Emma rubbed her eyes, momentarily confused before remembering our terrifying situation. "Do you think they came back while we were sleeping?" "No, honey, but we're going to be fine on our own. I've made a plan." I showed her my list. Secure water. 2. Maintain shelter. 3. Find, conserve food. 4. Signal for help. 5. Determine location, possible routes out. "We're going to treat this like a survival challenge," I explained, trying to inject some excitement into my voice. "Like those shows Daddy used to watch." Emma's face brightened slightly at the framing. "Like Survival Masters?" she asked, a hint of her usual spark returning. "Can I help?" "Absolutely, you're my survival partner. First mission water." I remembered from our hike that we'd crossed a small stream about 15 minutes from camp. Using Emma's compass, we set out to find it again, marking our path by tying strips of fabric from my spare t-shirt to branches. The stream, when we found it, was clear and running swiftly over rocks. I recalled from one of David's shows that moving water was safer than stagnant, but we should still boil it to be safe. "We'll fill our empty bottles and boil the water when we get back to camp," I told Emma, who was already eagerly dipping her fingers in the cool stream. "Can we catch fish here?" she asked, looking up hopefully. "Maybe. We'll try that tomorrow if we need to." Back at camp, I attempted to start a fire using the lighter and some dry leaves and twigs. It took multiple frustrating attempts before I managed to get a sustainable flame. Emma watched with wide eyes as I carefully built up the fire and placed our small pot of water on a flat rock in the flames. "You're really good at this, Mom," she said, her voice filled with admiration. I laughed gruffly, a hollow sound. "Not really. I'm just remembering what I've seen on TV. Your dad would be much better at this." "But Dad's not here," Emma said simply, her gaze unwavering. "You are." Her words, so simple and true, gave me a surge of strength. I might not be a wilderness expert, but I was all Emma had right now, and I would not let her down. After securing our water supply, we turned our attention to food. We had enough packaged food for maybe 3 days if we rationed carefully, but we desperately needed to supplement it. I remembered from our fishing expedition that there were berries growing near the lake. "Let's see what food we can find," I suggested. At the lake, we found bushes heavy with small blueberries. I hesitated, uncertain if they were safe. "Those are blueberries," Emma said confidently, her knowledge surprising me. "We learned about them in school. They're safe to eat." I examined one closely. It did indeed look like a blueberry, and I vaguely remembered seeing Ryan picking some the day before. We collected as many as we could carry in my bandana. Our next challenge was more daunting, trying to catch fish without proper equipment. Using a sharpened stick as a makeshift spear, I spent an hour attempting to stab at fish in the shallows of the lake, succeeding only in getting wet and frustrated. Emma, watching from the shore, suddenly suggested, "What if we made a trap instead? Like a net or something?" It was a brilliant idea. Using my limited knowledge and Emma's surprising creativity, we constructed a crude trap from branches and my shirt, placing it in a narrow part of the stream with some berries as bait. The rest of the day was spent reinforcing our tent with extra branches for stability, gathering more firewood, and taking stock of our surroundings. I found a large rock formation that might make a good landmark and possibly a better shelter if the weather turned bad. As evening approached, we checked our fish trap. Empty. Disappointed but not defeated, we adjusted it and decided to check again in the morning. That night, as we sat by the fire, eating our carefully rationed dinner of half a granola bar each and some berries, Emma surprised me with her incredible resilience. "This is kind of fun, Mom," she said, her face illuminated by the flickering flames. "It's like we're pioneers." I managed a genuine smile. "You're being very brave, Emma." "I'm not scared when I'm with you," she replied, leaning against me, her simple, unwavering trust nearly breaking me. What if I couldn't get us out of this? What if something truly terrible happened to her because of my family's unspeakable cruelty? Desperate measures. Day 3 brought new terrifying challenges. A sudden rainstorm swept through mid-morning, soaking us both, and nearly extinguishing our precious fire. I managed to shield enough embers under a large piece of bark to restart it once the rain passed, but our tent had suffered. One side had collapsed under the weight of the water, and our sleeping bags were damp and clammy. As I attempted to repair, the tent disaster struck. Reaching for a large branch to use as a support pole, I stepped in a hidden hole and twisted my ankle. The pain was immediate and intense, bringing tears to my eyes. "Mom!" Emma cried, running to my side, her small face filled with alarm. "Are you okay?" I couldn't lie. The pain was evident on my face. "I've hurt my ankle, sweetie. I need to rest it." Emma, a 10-year-old daughter who should have been safely at home playing with friends, immediately took charge. She helped me to a fallen log, brought me water, and then, with fierce determination etched on her small face, began gathering the firewood I'd been collecting. "Emma, you don't have to," I began protesting feebly. "Yes, I do," she interrupted firmly, her voice surprisingly strong. "We're survival partners. Remember, when one person gets hurt, the other person helps." I watched a complex mixture of pride and profound sorrow welling in my chest as my little girl stepped up in a way no child should ever have to. She brought me firewood, checked our fish trap still empty, and even tried to reinforce the tent herself. That evening, as I sat with my throbbing ankle elevated on my backpack, hunger gnawing relentlessly at my stomach, I faced the harsh reality: we couldn't continue like this much longer. Our food was dwindling rapidly, my injury severely limited our mobility, and there was no sign that anyone was looking for us. As Emma slept fitfully beside me in our sagging tent, I made a difficult decision. Tomorrow, injured or not, we would have to try to find our way out of this wilderness. Our very survival depended on it. The bear and the breakthrough. By the 5th day, our situation had become truly desperate. The small supply of food was completely gone, with nothing but a few meager berries to sustain us. More concerning than my own gnawing hunger was Emma's rapidly deteriorating condition. She had woken that morning with flushed cheeks and glassy, unfocused eyes. "I don't feel good, Mom," she mumbled as I pressed my hand to her forehead. The alarming heat radiating from her skin confirmed my worst fears: she had a fever. Whether from exposure, contaminated water, or something else, I couldn't be sure, but without medicine, clean water, and proper shelter, her condition would only worsen. "It's okay, baby," I soothed, giving her some of our precious remaining water. "Just rest." While Emma dozed fitfully in the tent, I took stock of our grim situation. My ankle, while still painful, could bear weight if absolutely necessary. Our water bottles were half empty. The weather had turned colder overnight, suggesting another storm might be approaching. We needed help, and we needed it soon. "Fire," I murmured to myself, a desperate thought sparking in my mind. "We need a signal fire." Despite the throbbing pain in my ankle, I gathered as much green vegetation as I could find. Remembering that green leaves and pine needles created more smoke. When I had a substantial pile, I carefully placed it over our small campfire, creating a thick column of white smoke that rose high above the trees. "Please," I whispered, watching the smoke drift upward, a desperate prayer on my lips. "Please let someone see this." For hours, I tirelessly maintained the signal fire, alternating between checking on Emma and adding more green material to create copious smoke. My throat grew raw from the acrid fumes, and my eyes stung, but I persisted. This was our best, perhaps only chance. As afternoon wore on, Emma's fever seemed to worsen. She tossed restlessly in the tent, occasionally calling out for her father or mumbling incoherently. I used our dwindling water supply to dampen my bandana and place it on her forehead, but it seemed to provide little lasting relief. Just as I was adding more material to the fire, a rustling in the underbrush sent me spinning around. 20 yards away at the edge of our clearing stood a black bear. It was smaller than I'd imagined bears would be, probably young, but still easily large enough to kill us both. It sniffed the air curiously, its small eyes fixed on me. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slowly backed toward the tent, never taking my eyes off the formidable animal. I'd heard conflicting advice about bears' play. Dead fight back, make noise, but in that terrifying moment, all rational thought fled my mind. "Emma," I whispered as I reached the tent, my voice barely audible. "Emma, wake up. We need to move, quietly." Emma stirred groggy and disoriented. When she saw the bear, her eyes widened in pure terror, but she remained remarkably silent, instinctively understanding the imminent danger. "We're going to back away very slowly," I murmured, my voice shaking. "Then we'll climb that big tree over there." Step by excruciating step, we retreated from our campsite, the bear watching us with what seemed like curious indifference. When we reached the large oak I'd indicated, I boosted Emma up to the lowest branch, ignoring the screaming pain in my ankle, then pulled myself up after her. "Keep climbing," I urged, helping her up to a sturdy branch about 15 feet off the ground. From our precarious perch, we watched as the bear ambled into our camp, investigating our tent, and knocking over the pot we'd been using for water. It seemed particularly interested in our backpacks, probably smelling the lingering scent of food. "Is it going to go away?" Emma whispered, her small body trembling against mine. "Yes, once it realizes there's no food," I assured her, desperately hoping I was right. We remained in that tree for what felt like endless hours, watching the bear destroy what little remained of our camp. Emma's fever made her drift in and out of consciousness, leaning heavily against me. I tied her to the branch with my belt, terrified she might fall in her weakened state. As dusk approached and the bear finally wandered away, the full crushing weight of our situation crashed over me. Our shelter was in tatters, our few supplies scattered or destroyed, and Emma was seriously, dangerously ill. I could no longer pretend we were having an adventure or that I had everything under control. Alone in that tree with Emma sleeping fitfully against me, I finally broke down. Silent tears streamed down my face as I stared up at the darkening sky visible through the branches. "Why?" I whispered to the emptiness. "Why would you do this to your own granddaughter?" In my mind's eye, I saw my father's stern face, my mother's disapproving frown, Ryan's smug superiority. A lifetime of conditional love and insidious manipulation culminating in this ultimate monstrous betrayal. "I hate you," I hissed through clenched teeth. "I hate all of you." As if in response, I heard Ryan's voice in my head. "You've always been weak, Megan, always taking the easy way out." The hallucination was so vivid, I nearly looked around for him before realizing it was just my exhausted, hungry mind playing cruel tricks. But something about the imagined taunt sparked a memory. On the drive to the campsite, my father had mentioned something about a ranger station being just down the main trail. At the time, I'd paid little attention, focused instead on Emma's excitement about the trip. A ranger station. If it existed, if we could find it, we might have a chance. With new fierce determination cutting through my despair, I gently shook Emma awake. "Sweetie, we need to leave the tree now. The bear is gone." Emma blinked up at me, her eyes unnaturally bright with fever. "Where are we going?" "To find help," I said firmly. I remembered something about a ranger station. We're going to find it. Getting down from the tree was a formidable challenge with my injured ankle and Emma's weakened state, but we managed it slowly and painfully. Our campsite was a disaster. The tent collapsed, our backpacks torn open, everything scattered. I salvaged what I could. The flashlight, Emma's compass, a torn piece of the tent that could serve as a makeshift carrying sling. Then, using branches as improvised walking sticks, we set out as the last light faded from the sky. "Which way?" Emma asked, her voice faint. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the drive-in, the direction the cars had been pointing when parked. The main trail had to lead to the road eventually. "This way," I decided, pointing east according to Emma's compass. "Stay close to me." Using the flashlight sparingly to conserve its dwindling batteries, we stumbled through the darkening forest. Emma grew weaker with each painful step until finally she couldn't continue. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I can't walk anymore." Without hesitation, I fashioned the tent fabric into a drag sling, placed Emma on it, and began pulling her behind me. The pain in my ankle was excruciating, but I ignored it, focusing only on putting one foot in front of the other. "You're the strongest person I know," Emma murmured deliriously from the makeshift stretcher. I didn't feel strong. I felt terrified, exhausted, and consumed by a cold, burning rage toward my family that burned hotter than any fever. But I kept moving, dragging my precious daughter through the dark forest, determined that we would not become victims of my family's unspeakable cruelty. As the night deepened around us and exhaustion threatened to overcome me, I made a silent vow. If we survived this, when we survived this, my family would pay dearly for what they had done, not just to me, but to an innocent child, whose only crime was being my daughter. With that searing thought fueling each painful, agonizing step, I continued through the darkness, my flashlight beam growing dimmer as the batteries faded, mirroring my own dwindling strength. Rescue and reckoning. I awoke to the gentle, diffused light of dawn filtering through the trees, momentarily disoriented. At some point during the night, I must have collapsed from sheer exhaustion beside Emma's makeshift stretcher. My body ached profoundly, and my ankle throbbed with renewed intense pain. But something else had changed. Emma was sitting up, looking around with surprising clarity in her eyes. "Mom," she said when she saw I was awake, her voice clearer than it had been in days. I feel better. I pressed my hand to her forehead. The burning heat of the previous day had diminished considerably. Not gone entirely, but remarkably improved. Your fever's breaking, I said, a wave of overwhelming relief washing over me. That's good, really good. As I struggled to my feet, wincing at the searing pain in my ankle, something caught my eye. A small wooden post with faded red markings. I limped over to investigate and felt a surge of exhilarating hope. It was a trail marker. Emma, I called out excitedly. We found a real trail. Emma managed a weak smile. Does that mean we're saved? It means we have a much better chance now, I replied, helping her stand. Can you walk a little today? She nodded determinedly. I think so. With renewed purpose, we began following the marked trail. Emma leaned heavily on me, but she was moving under her own power, which I took as an incredibly encouraging sign. I couldn't be sure if this trail led directly to the ranger station I'd remembered, or simply connected to other hiking paths, but it was our best and only option. As the morning progressed, Emma's strength seemed to return incrementally. Her fever, while not completely gone, continued to recede. She even commented on the beauty of a cardinal that flitted across our path, the first sign of her normal curiosity and joyful spirit returning. We had been walking for perhaps 2 hours when Emma suddenly stopped. Mom, she whispered, I hear voices. I froze, listening intently. At first I heard nothing but the rustle of leaves and distant birdsong. Then faintly but unmistakably human voices. Hello, I called out, my voice cracking from disuse and dehydration. Is someone there? We need help. For a terrifying moment, there was silence. Then a man's voice responded, Hello, who's there? Here, I shouted, waving my arms frantically despite the shooting pain. We're here. 2 figures appeared around a bend in the trail, a middle-aged man and a boy of about 12, both dressed in proper hiking gear with sturdy boots and backpacks. The man's expression shifted from curiosity to alarm as he took in our disheveled, pathetic appearance. My God, he exclaimed, hurrying toward us. Are you all right? We've been lost for days, I explained, tears of pure relief threatening to overwhelm me. My daughter has a fever, and I've injured my ankle. Do you have a phone? Can you call for help? The man, who introduced himself as Marcus, and the boy, his son Jason, quickly assessed our dire condition. No cell service out here, Marcus said, his voice kind and reassuring. But we're only about 2 miles from the ranger station. Jason, give them your water bottle and those granola bars from your pack. As Emma and I gratefully accepted the food and water, Marcus explained they were on a weekend hiking trip and had set out from the ranger station that morning. We can help you back there. He offered his compassion a balm to my weary soul. The ranger can call for medical assistance. I nearly collapsed with relief. Thank you so much. With Marcus supporting me and Jason walking alongside a still weak Emma, we slowly, painfully made our way along the trail. The hike was arduous, but knowing help was finally within reach gave me a surge of strength I didn't know I still possessed. Marcus asked what had happened, and I gave him an abbreviated, carefully crafted version. Family camping trip separated during a hike, got lost trying to find our way back. I wasn't ready to explain the full horrifying truth to a stranger, the deliberate abandonment that had nearly killed us. When we finally reached the ranger station, a rustic but sturdy building with a prominent radio antenna and a parked Forest Service vehicle, I felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly knocked me off my feet. We had made it. Against all odds, we had survived. The ranger, a no-nonsense woman named Ranger Patricia Collins, took one look at us and immediately went into action. She helped us inside, provided clean water and proper food, and began assessing our medical needs. Your daughter is dehydrated, but her fever's mild, she told me after examining Emma. Your ankle's badly sprained, possibly worse. I'm calling for medical transport. As she made the call on the station's radio, I finally allowed myself to relax slightly, holding Emma close on the station's worn couch. We made it, sweetie, I whispered into her hair, my voice trembling with emotion. We're safe now. Within an hour, paramedics arrived in an all-terrain vehicle. They provided immediate treatment for dehydration, cleaned, and properly bandaged the various cuts and scrapes we'd accumulated, and prepared us for transport to the nearest hospital. As they were loading us into the vehicle, Ranger Collins approached with a concerned expression. Miss Mitchell, I need to ask you, you mentioned you were camping with family. Should we be looking for other missing persons? I looked her directly in the eyes, my voice steady, imbued with a newfound resolve. They're not missing. They abandoned us, deliberately. My parents and my brother's family left us there with minimal supplies and no way to call for help. Her expression shifted from concern to shock, then to righteous anger. That's criminal endangerment, especially with a child involved. I'll need to report this to the sheriff. Good, I said firmly. They deserve to face consequences. Justice served and new beginnings. At the hospital, Emma and I were treated for dehydration exposure and various minor injuries. My ankle was indeed severely sprained, requiring a walking boot and crutches. Emma's mysterious fever was diagnosed as a combination of stress exposure and a minor infection that responded quickly to antibiotics. The story of our abandonment and remarkable survival spread quickly. A local news reporter showed up at the hospital, and though I initially declined to comment, I eventually realized that public exposure of what my family had done might be the only way to ensure justice. The sheriff, a gruff but compassionate man named Keith Donovan, interviewed us at length, taking detailed notes and recording my statement. "I've been in law enforcement for 27 years, he said when I'd finished my account, and I've never heard of anything like this. Rest assured, we will be investigating thoroughly and pressing charges." True to his word, the investigation moved swiftly. Search warrants for my parents' and brother's computers revealed damning evidence emails discussing their intervention plan, searches for wilderness survival rates, and even a calendar entry marking when they planned to return to the campsite 10 days after they'd left us. By that point, Emma and I had been moved to a comfortable hotel room paid for by a victim's assistance fund. We were recovering physically, though the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. On the 10th day after our abandonment, the very day my family had apparently planned to rescue us, Sheriff Donovan called. "Miss Mitchell, I thought you should know your parents' and brother's family just arrived at the campsite. They're being taken into custody now." A few hours later, I stood in my hotel room watching the local news coverage. There they were, my father Harold, my mother Barbara, my brother Ryan, and his wife Tara, being led in handcuffs to police vehicles. Their expressions ranged from shock to indignation to fear. According to the news report, when questioned about their actions, my father had claimed it was just a lesson that had gotten out of hand. They had allegedly planned to return after a week, believing the experience would convince me to abandon my plans to move to Seattle. A knock at the door interrupted the broadcast. Sheriff Donovan stood there with a grim expression. "Your parents are requesting to see you," he said. "You don't have to agree." I glanced back at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully for the first time since our ordeal began. "Tell them I'll see them," I said quietly, my voice firm. "But not for their sake, for mine." The hospital room where the meeting took place was sterile and cold, much like the relationship that had led to this moment. My parents sat side by side, still in their outdoor clothes, looking somehow smaller diminished than I remembered. Ryan and Tara waited in a separate room. I wasn't ready to face my brother yet. "Megan," my mother began, her voice wavering. "We never meant—" "Stop!" I interrupted, my voice steady and cold, devoid of any emotion. "You meant exactly what you did. You left a mother and child in the wilderness to die because you couldn't control me." "That's not true," my father protested, his voice weak. "We left you supplies. We were coming back in 10 days. Emma had a fever," I said, my voice rising slightly. "We were attacked by a bear. If we hadn't found help, we would have died, and it would have been murder." The color drained from my mother's face. "A bear, Megan, we didn't know." "Of course you didn't know," I exploded, my composure finally cracking. "You abandoned your daughter and granddaughter in the wilderness. What did you think would happen?" My father reached for my hand across the table. I pulled back as if burned. "We thought you'd stay at the campsite," he said weakly. "We thought you'd be fine until we came back. We just wanted to show you that you need your family, that you can't make it on your own." I laughed bitterly, a harsh, humorless sound. "Well, you proved exactly the opposite. Emma and I survived despite you, not because of you, and we will continue to thrive without you in our lives." "You can't mean that," my mother whispered, tears finally streaming down her face. "We're your family." I stood looking down at the two people who had given me life and then nearly taken it away. "Not anymore," I said firmly. "Family doesn't do what you did. Family protects each other. You're just people who share my DNA, and after today, you won't be sharing anything else with me or Emma ever again." As I turned to leave, my father called out desperately, "We can change. We can get help." "Please, Megan." I paused at the door. "You should get help," I said, my voice softer, but no less resolute. "But not for me. For yourselves. Because what you did wasn't just criminal. It was monstrous. And I will never, ever forgive you for putting Emma through that hell." Walking away from that room, I felt a monumental weight lifting from my shoulders. The crushing burden of seeking approval from people who had never truly loved me unconditionally, who had seen me as something to control rather than someone to cherish. Back at the hotel, I found Emma awake and drawing pictures of trees and mountains. "Did you see them?" she asked quietly. I nodded, sitting beside her on the bed. "I did. Are they sorry?" I considered lying, protecting her from the harsh reality, but Emma deserved the truth. "They're sorry they got caught. They're sorry about the consequences. but I don't think they truly understand what they did wrong. Emma nodded sagely with a wisdom beyond her years. That's because they're broken inside, Mom. Grandma told me once that love means making people do what's best for them, even if it hurts. But that's not right, is it? I pulled her close, marveling at her profound insight. No, sweetie, it's not. Real love is supporting people even when they make choices you wouldn't make. It's about respect and trust, not control. As we sat there together, survivors of both nature's dangers and human cruelty, I knew with absolute certainty that our move to Seattle would now be not just a new opportunity, but a true fresh start, free from the toxic bonds that had nearly cost us everything. Emma and I would build a life based on the authentic love we discovered in each other during our darkest hours. Lessons learned and a call to action. 6 months after our terrifying abandonment in the wilderness, Emma and I sat in the back of a courtroom in Pennsylvania, watching as the judge delivered his verdict. My parents, brother, and sister-in-law had all been found guilty of child endangerment, reckless endangerment, and attempted involuntary manslaughter. The court cannot overlook the premeditated nature of these actions, the judge stated firmly, his voice resonating through the courtroom. To deliberately abandon a woman and child in a remote wilderness with minimal supplies and no means of communication demonstrates a shocking disregard for human life. My father was sentenced to 5 years in prison, my mother and Ryan to 3 years each, and Tara to 2 years with the possibility of parole after 1. Additionally, permanent restraining orders were issued legally, barring all of them from contacting Emma or me ever again. As we left the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Our story had captured national attention, sparking vital discussions about family dynamics control and the lengths some people would go to maintain power over others. "Miss Mitchell, how do you feel about the verdict?" a reporter called out. I paused, holding Emma's hand tightly. Justice was served today, but this was never about punishment. It was about protection, ensuring that my daughter and I can move forward with our lives safely. Another shouted, "Do you have anything to say to your family?" They're not my family anymore, I replied simply, my voice unwavering. Family is about love and support, not control and manipulation. Emma and I have found our real family in each other, and in the incredible community that has supported us through this ordeal. That community had indeed been extraordinary. After our story broke, we received an outpouring of support from the first responders who had helped rescue us, from victim advocates who guided us through the complex legal process, and from countless strangers who sent letters, care packages, and even financial contributions to help us rebuild our lives. A month after the trial, we finally made our move to Seattle, though to a different neighborhood than originally planned for privacy and security. The school that had offered me the teaching position stood by their offer, demonstrating a level of understanding and compassion that reinforced my belief in human kindness, despite what we had endured. Emma, remarkable in her resilience, adapted quickly to our new home and school, developing a particular interest in environmental science inspired by our experiences. But the trauma lingered in subtle ways. She developed a fear of the dark, became anxious when I was out of sight for too long, and sometimes woke crying from nightmares about being lost in the woods. Dr. Leah Winters. Our trauma-focused therapist worked diligently with us both individually and in joint sessions. She helped Emma process her fears through art therapy and guided me through the complex emotions I grappled with. Anger, betrayal, guilt, and profound grief for the family relationships that had been irreparably destroyed. "You're carrying a lot of guilt," Dr. Winters observed during one of our sessions. "You believe you should have protected Emma from this." "I should have seen the signs," I admitted, tears flowing freely. "I knew something wasn't right with the trip, with how they were acting, but I ignored my instincts." "Megan," she said gently, "your parents and brother spent a lifetime conditioning you to doubt your instincts, to prioritize their approval over your own judgment. Breaking free from that conditioning is part of your healing process." Slowly, session by session, we began to heal. Emma's nightmares became less frequent. I learned to recognize and validate my own feelings, rather than dismissing them as I had been taught to do throughout my childhood. For months after moving to Seattle, I found myself standing before a room full of strangers at a community center, openly sharing our story at a support group for survivors of family trauma. The hardest part, I told the group, wasn't the physical survival in the wilderness. It was accepting that the people who should have loved me the most were willing to put my child at risk to maintain control over me. A woman in the front row nodded, tears streaming down her face. After the meeting, she approached me hesitantly. "Thank you for speaking," she said. "I've been making excuses for my parents' behavior my whole life. Hearing your story helped me realize I'm not obligated to keep people in my life who hurt me, even if they're family." That powerful conversation sparked an idea. With encouragement from Dr. Winters and strong support from local advocacy groups, I established the Mitchell Foundation for Family Trauma and Wilderness Safety. The foundation served dual purposes, providing much-needed resources for survivors of family abuse and educating people about essential wilderness safety. Through the foundation, Emma and I connected with countless others who had experienced similar betrayals by family members. We built a vibrant network of support, a chosen family bound by understanding, empathy, and respect rather than obligation and toxic control. On the 1-year anniversary of our abandonment, Emma suggested something that truly surprised me. "I want to go camping, Mom," she said over breakfast. "Real camping, the right way." I stared at her uncertain. "Are you sure, sweetie, we don't have to do that?" She nodded firmly. "I don't want to be afraid of the forest forever, and I don't want them to take that away from us, too." With careful preparation, proper equipment, and an experienced guide, we returned to the wilderness, not to Blackwood Forest, but to a beautiful national park in Washington. We set up our tent together, built a safe campfire, and sat beneath the stars, feeling truly free. "How do you feel?" I asked Emma as we roasted marshmallows, the simple act a symbol of our triumph. She considered the question thoughtfully. "Proud," she finally answered, her eyes shining. "We're survivors, Mom. And now we're explorers, too." That camping trip became an annual tradition, our way of reclaiming something that had been tainted by trauma and transforming it into a joyous celebration of our strength and unbreakable bond. In the years that followed, our lives took shape in ways I never could have imagined during those desperate days in the wilderness. My teaching career flourished, and Emma thrived in school, developing a particular interest in environmental science, a testament to her resilience. Inspired by our experiences, I wrote a book about our ordeal that became a bestseller and helped countless others recognize and escape toxic family dynamics. 5 years after the abandonment, Emma and I stood before a room full of mothers and daughters at our foundation's annual wilderness safety workshop. Now 15. Emma had grown into a confident, compassionate young woman with none of the manipulative tendencies that had characterized my family of origin. The most important lesson I learned, Emma told the group, her voice clear and strong, is that you get to choose your path. Not your grandparents, not society, not even your past experiences. You decide who you want to be and what kind of relationships you want to have. As I listened to my daughter's profound wisdom, I reflected on our incredible journey. The abandonment that was meant to break us had instead broken the chains that had bound me to toxic relationships for decades. In losing the family that had tried to control me, I had found the freedom to become the mother, teacher, and woman I was truly meant to be. That night after the workshop, Emma and I walked along Seattle's waterfront, the twinkling lights of the city, reflecting on the dark, calm water. "Do you ever wonder about them?" Emma asked suddenly, her voice quiet. "Grandma and Grandpa Uncle Ryan." I considered the question honestly. Sometimes I wonder if they've changed, if they understand what they did wrong. But I don't miss them. Not really. I miss the idea of what family should be, but we found that elsewhere. Emma nodded, linking her arm through mine. "We made our own family with people who actually love us." "Yes," I agreed, a peaceful smile gracing my lips. "We did." As we turned toward home, I thought about how far we had come from that moment of terrible realization in the clearing when we discovered we had been abandoned by those who should have protected us. The journey had been painful, the healing slow, and sometimes difficult, but we had emerged stronger, wiser, and truly free. And in the end, that was the most powerful revenge of all. What's your story of overcoming betrayal or family trauma? Have you ever had to create crucial boundaries with toxic family members to protect yourself or your loved ones? I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories of survival and resilience. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is far more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey of healing.